Hi, I'm Francine Dowse and I'm Tasmania's Chief Nurse and Midwifery Officer. In Tasmania, the Chief Nurse and Midwifery Officer role is actually positioned within the Department of Health. And of course, as one health system, the Department of Health and the Tasmanian Health Service work in partnership to deliver public sector health services to the Tasmanian community. So, as a registered nurse and a registered midwife of more than 40 years, I bring a collective view of both professions to this role. Nursing and midwifery are professions in their own right, and they are distinct in terms of their scope of practice and their contribution to the health system more broadly. So, as a dual registrant, a registered nurse and a registered midwife, I'm privileged to actually look at the full helicopter view of health services that the public sector deliver. And that includes acute services, community-based services, working in partnership with mental health services, public health, and the full domain of health services delivered across the Tasmanian Health Service. My role includes looking at workforce planning, professional regulation, education training, legislation, and probably every point of the healthcare system where a nurse or midwife intersects or contributes to the outcomes of the department. I've reflected on this question quite a bit, and while there have been some individual turning points, I guess my career has been characterised by a range of opportunities that have been available to me, often working in small spaces, small facilities and small regions. We need to be more flexible. So over the early part of my career, opportunities became available and I took those opportunities, and I guess that's been a characteristic of my journey for the last 40 years. But the turning points in my career, I've thought really hard about this, and I think they come down to maybe 3 turning points. So in 2008, I was invited to be part of an international study tour to the UK and to the USA, led by the Chief Nurse and Midwifery Officer at that time. And I was the midwifery representative to that study tour. And the Party of 20 actually returned to Tasmania and created what we termed then the Leading Way strategy, which was a health professionals' change of model of care here in Tasmania. So that really stood me well in terms of the decisions I made beyond 2008. And then in 2015, I was invited to be part of an international leadership course in Geneva, Switzerland. And that took every ounce of my being in terms of courage and commitment to participate in that course. But I successfully completed that. And being an alumni of that group has created a whole range of opportunities for me now internationally. So I'd say that really was a turning point in the more recent years of my career. And of course, the jewel in my crown was being appointed as Tasmania's Chief Nurse and Midwifery Officer in 2016. I think the most enjoyable part of my role is really the diversity that I find myself in. Nursing and midwifery in Tasmania, of course, is the largest workforce in our health system. And whilst that actually affords us opportunity, it also affords us a lot of challenges. So the thing that I enjoy about my role right now is the important role that we play in the reforms and the challenges that we currently see in our health system. I'm afforded the luxury of and confidence of our health executive to be innovative in the redesign of our health workforce and to actually do some different things to meet the challenges that we currently face in our small state. So I'll again focus on our workforce challenges. Over the last couple of years, we've had a really strong enterprise bargain agreement that we've negotiated with our unions, and that's created a lot of innovation. And particularly, we have focused on uplifting our enrolled nurse workforce. So we're currently working towards a target of 30% of our direct care workforce being enrolled nurses. So in order to do that, we've not only had to look at perhaps changing culture around the enrolled nurse workforce and how they operate in our health system to be stronger in terms of registered nurse, enrolled nurse partnerships in practice, but also working with education providers to expand the number of enrolments that we have, to strengthen our graduate transition to practice pathways, and then to think about what can we do more innovatively in delivering care to our community and offsetting some of the challenges that we have in recruitment and retention of our workforce. Some of the other areas we're looking at currently are diversifying midwifery education pathways, creating opportunities for our students of nursing and midwifery to work inside our health system as they study their courses, and then to think about how we can strengthen and uplift and rethink, if you like, transition to practice for our graduates and the early career period, where of course consolidation and building confidence and competence in practice is so important. Every state and territory has a Chief Nurse and Midwifery Officer, and while we work in different ways and may be positioned slightly different within our organisational structures, the focus and the key objectives of the role are really quite consistent, and we work collectively through relationships and where we have keen areas of interest. More recently, we've been working with the Nursing Midwifery Board of Australia to introduce RN designated prescribing, and that's a really great example of where the states and territories come together with really a focus around elevating nursing practice and then working with the regulators to make this happen. Jurisdictionally, we all have our own circumstances that we're dealing with, but bringing all of those elements together with a national focus is really critical. Many of us now also intersect into the international space through the International Council of Nurses, through the World Health Organisation, and with other organisations that actually contribute to practice across the world. So it's really important that each of us not only keep pace with what's happening here in Australia, but those international trends where we can influence what other countries are doing, but also where we can learn from the work that's happening in those other countries that adds to the richness of the Australian context. Tasmania is not dissimilar to what we're seeing right across Australia and indeed globally. We do actually have a health workforce gap, and certainly we are working really hard to create local solutions to our workforce challenges. So the trends that we're seeing is not only still a strong interest in coming into our health system as a nurse or a midwife, but then those changing expectations of our profession. It's always been really difficult to be a shift worker, and we need to understand, what does work-life balance look like for our health workforce? Are we creating the right wellbeing strategies for our teams? Are we creating the right culture in our teams to make sure that we've got a healthy workplace and in fact people want to come and work for us and they want to stay working for us? So the trends that I'm seeing, and this has changed over the last few years, wellbeing now is sitting very strongly as a focus for our nurses and midwives. I think we learnt a lot through COVID, and I think the expectations of our nurses and midwives are changing over time, and we need to keep pace with what those changing expectations might look like. But again, always thinking about how we're meeting the needs of our community, because of course our community is changing as well. I love talking to our graduates, because when you come into a profession as a fresh-eyed new graduate with lots and lots of energy, sometimes those career pathways aren't really that apparent, and we really focus on the clinical area of our practice. But nursing and midwifery is a very diverse profession, and so my advice to graduates all the time is not to box yourself into one pathway. The world is your oyster in terms of where your practice can take you. And actually, when we think about planning our careers, thinking about the 4 domains of practice being clinical, management, education, research and policy, create that broader thinking about where nursing and midwifery can take you. In terms of my role, I work in the policy domain, and whilst that mightn't always be where our nurses and midwives see themselves being positioned later in their career, it does afford a different way of practice, bringing together all of that experience, clinical knowledge, understanding of health systems to really shape policy and to influence the direction of healthcare systems. Advice I always give includes: be comfortable in the uncomfortable. And that's not an easy thing to do. But if you get yourself a good mentor, surround yourself with positive people, accept critical feedback and reduce the negativity in the people around you, you'll actually position yourself very, very well to have those options and opportunities available. And again, if an opportunity comes your way, back yourself. Back yourself 100%, because you're far more capable than you realise. have to admit, I'm actually not that disciplined in investing in my time away from work. I do have a very high pressure position, and I really commit myself more than 100% to my work. But what I do like to do is read, and I like to take myself away from the intensity of my role when I'm outside of the office. I'm not as disciplined as I should be about reading at the moment, but I'm actually reading a novel at the moment about the Banker Island tragedy, where 22 Australian nurses in conflict found themselves drawing on every ounce of their courage, and obviously that was a very sad outcome, but drawing on the experience of those nurses. So it's sobering reading, but it's a very, very uplifting story of courage and bravery for our elders of our profession. I also like to travel, and most of my travel over the last few years has been surrounded by work, but I always like to try and tack on something special when I travel as well. And as I look towards perhaps my next chapter of my life, I've got a lot of goals that I want to do, and that includes investing more in the things that I've not been able to do in the last few years because of the intensity of my role and the commitment that I've given to that job.